Milk Minute.
Good day, learners! Are you familiar with King Solomon in the Bible? He is famous or known because of his wise decisions during his reign. He was gifted with wisdom or the quality of experience, knowledge, and good judgment. And looking into the reality of our lives, wisdom is something that we hope we possess, especially when we face situations that require us to make choices. And in making choices, we always expect that our choices give us better results. But that's not how life is sometimes. We tend to learn the hard way instead. However, as we get to experience things and learn our lessons, we get to be more careful of our choices. And at an early age of yours, it is necessary for you to learn how to be prudent. Thus, it is very important for you to take lessons and listen what the experienced and wise people have to say about making choices for you to emulate.
Senior High School on Air.
Senior High School on Air. The frontline of quality and excellent learning.
Excellent learning. You have all the best of the best.
Best of the best of the
Sa
best.
magaling umaga, handa na ba kayong matuto?
Handa na po.
Reading and writing.
Pagbasa at pagsusuri ng teksto tungo sa pananaliksik.
Practical Research 1.
English for academic and professional purposes.
Ability and Statistics.
General Biology 2.
Disciplines and ideas in applied social sciences.
Cookery and more.
Senior High School, best of the best.
Best of the best of the best.
Good day, my dear learners. How are you today? I hope you're still doing great because we are now at the last quarter of this school year. Can you imagine that? Despite the challenges this pandemic brought us, you were able to adjust and surpass them all. A virtual clap for all of you, my dear learners. I hope that you're still excited to learn new things again. First off, let me start by introducing myself. I am Sir Jeremy Tamayo Hilbaliga, your radio teacher in Introduction to Philosophy of the Human Person. Get ready for this episode because we have more things prepared just for you, my dear learners. Let me give you a few reminders before we start our learning session. Whether you are tuning in through our radio or through our Facebook page, place your device where it can reach a good signal. Make sure that this spot is favorable for learning so you will grasp the lesson well. Also, set up the necessary materials for this session, such as your notebook, journal, and pens, where you can write your answers and reflections. Last but not the least, listen, because I believe that you will learn more if you listen carefully. Are you all set up now? Well, that's great. Now, let us have a recap of our lesson in the last episode. You learned about the human person in the environment. What is the branch of philosophy that we learned again last time? Correct, environmental philosophy. And it is concerned with the natural environment and humanity's place in it. There are three major views regarding the relationship between humanity and environment. Can you name them all? Very good. Anthropocentrism, biocentrism, and ecocentrism. You also learned that human activities have a significant impact in the environment. What do you think it is? That's right. Human activities over the centuries have resulted in great changes in climate patterns throughout the world. So, what can we do to uphold environmentalism and care for nature? Very good. Let us join the advocacy in taking care of our nature. Sustainability or sustainable development is a concept that advocates the wise and efficient use of our natural resources. It emphasizes that human activities must not unduly harm the environment, that natural resources must be used wisely. and the environment must be preserved for the next generation. What a great episode we had last time! I hope that you will apply the things you learned from that episode. We can now proceed to our new lesson. Today, we are going to talk about the freedom of the human person. Let us have a pretest before we start our discussion. All you need to do is write true if the statement is correct and false if the statement is wrong. Please write your answers on a piece of paper. Again, write true if the statement is correct and false if the statement is wrong. Please write your answers on a piece of paper. Let's proceed to number 1. Freedom is the ability to make choices and perform actions. I'll repeat for number 1, freedom is the ability to make choices and perform actions. Is it true or false? Let's proceed to number 2. Having and exercising freedom entails certain responsibilities. I'll repeat, having and exercising freedom entail certain responsibilities. Is it true or false? For number 3, the two important elements of human freedom are voluntariness and tardiness. I'll repeat, the two important elements of human freedom are voluntariness and tardiness. True or false? For number 4, the three kinds of freedom are physical freedom, psychological freedom, and freedom of speech. I'll repeat, the three kinds of freedom are physical freedom, psychological freedom, and freedom of speech. And for number 5, freedom should be exercised in a responsible and beneficial manner. I'll repeat, freedom should be exercised in a responsible and beneficial manner.
Tayo na sa Radyo Eskwela. Tayo na!
Now class, let us check your answers. For number 1, the answer is true. For number 2, the answer, true. How about number 3? That's right, the answer is false. Number 4? Correct, it's false. And how about number 5? That's right, the answer is true. Did you get a perfect score? Amazing! I think you're ready to learn today. But before we continue, let us listen to this infomercial.
Gusto ko nang mag-aral, gusto ko nang bumalik sa paaralan. Ngunit paano ang gagawin kung may virus pa rin? Manatili sa inyong tahanan, wag na wag pairalin ang sariling karunungan. Magtiwala sa batas ng inyong bansa at nang ikaw ay hindi nawawala. Gusto ko nang lumabas, pero ay bawal pala ikaw lumabas. Bawal lumabas, bawal lumabas, bawal lumabas, bawal lumabas. Manatili sa iyong tahanan para ikaw ay ligtas. Ang kagawaran ng edukasyon ay naghahanda na para sa ligtas na pagbubukas ng klase. Mga mag-aaral, kahit nasa tahanan lamang, ang edukasyon ay maihahatid ng may kaligtasan. Isang paalala mula sa kagawaran ng edukasyon at sa himpilang ito.
Welcome back, my dear learners. We can now go on with the topic. I have questions, my dear learners. Have you ever made a decision in your life that you regretted afterwards? I think a lot of us did that already. What was the lesson you learned that moment? That's right, we became careful of the choices after making a mistake. Human persons are created to have freedom, and this freedom is an intrinsic and essential property of the person. This means that human person by nature is a free being. It is in his or her nature to seek freedom. An important indication of the human freedom is the ability to make choices and perform actions. Our freedom to act sets us apart from other beings. Let's compare how animals and the human person behave to get a better understanding of freedom. A well-trained dog can perform certain tasks on commands such as stay or fetch, in light of the fact that they are trained to do as such. The same cannot be about human beings. You can't simply approach a person, throw him or her a ball, and say, "Fetch." You will surely get a curious and suspicious stare. A person will not act consequently to the order since the person is not conditioned to obey like the dog. A person can choose the course of action to take when given a stimulus or confronted with certain circumstances. Our inherent freedom makes us very dynamic creatures, and our actions do not necessarily follow a set pattern or a predetermined course. Freedom is also understood as the power to be what you want to be and the ability to decide and create yourself. For instance, if you want to develop your singing talent, then choose to dedicate your time and effort to improve to the fullest. There are three kinds of freedom: the physical freedom, psychological freedom, and moral freedom. What are the three kinds of freedom again, my dear learners? Very good. We have physical, psychological, and moral freedom. Physical freedom refers to the absence of any physical restraint. The person has the freedom of mobility to go where he or she wants to go. The second is psychological freedom. This is also called the freedom of choice. The person is free to perform actions that he or she considers right or wise. A person can be free to act or not to act. While moral freedom refers to using freedom in a manner that upholds dignity and goodness. A person becomes more free when he or she uses his freedom well, but becomes less free when he or she uses it in a bad way. Slavery is a dehumanizing act that denies a person's freedom because a person is forced to work for life without the possibility of ever living a life of bondage. But what makes us free? How does freedom shape our experiences? There are two elements that define freedom. One is voluntariness, and the other is responsibility. What are the two elements again? You're right. Voluntariness refers to the ability of the person to act out of his or her own free will and self-determination. This means that the person may decide to act or not to act, and these decisions made out of her own free will. For example, Mang Roman was walking down the street when he suddenly saw an old lady with a handful of bags crossing the road. He saw the old lady is having a difficult time to carry her things. Mang Roman decided to take actions. He carried the old lady's bag and helped her across the street and assure her safety. Reflect on the action and choices that were made in the situation. What would you think would happen if Mang Roman did not help the old lady? Reflect on your own experiences and actions. Have you ever made a voluntary actions to address a bad situation? You may have come across some situations where you knew something bad was happening. Did you make a voluntary actions to prevent something bad from happening? Or did you choose not to act? Please write your reflections on your journal. Whenever we decide to take actions, these results in certain consequences. All human actions have consequences, and this affects not only the person who commits the action, but also other people and our surroundings. As free beings, the person must accept the consequences of his or her action and take responsibility for them. The second element of freedom is responsibility. This refers to the person being accountable for his or her actions and their consequences. Taking responsibility can either mean a person voluntarily taking responsibility for his or her own actions or being held responsible by other people. Responsibility can also have a positive or negative meaning. It goes together with voluntariness in determining the morality of an action. Going back to the scenario, if Mang Roman was able to rescue the old lady from being hit by a car, he would take responsibility for his heroic actions. The other people who saw his act may regard him as a hero and express admiration for him. On the other hand, if Mang Roman was unable to save the old lady in time, the taxi driver could be held responsible for hitting the old lady. Mang Roman may also hold himself responsible for failing to save the old lady. On the other hand, a person who had no awareness of the effect of his or her actions can be considered as acting with diminished freedom. For example, a person who tried to scare his or her classmate by putting a fake spider in his or her back, then the surprised friend decided to run away, but in his or her panic, he hit the wall and was injured. It was not the intention of the person who committed the prank to get his friends to be hurt. But it happened because he did not fully consider the consequences of his actions. Without these two elements, human freedom is diminished, and the person makes imperfect actions and unwise decisions which may have negative effects on the self and the others. We should then realize that freedom is experienced through the act of making choices. Real life is not a movie where we can stop and rewind events and get a second take on the situation. Therefore, it is very important that when we are confronted with choices, we exercise caution and prudence and reflect on our possible courses of actions. With this in mind, how can we really exercise our freedom in a responsible and beneficial manner?
Halina't matuto, gamit ang ating radyo, pakinggan at unawain, aralin na ituturo. Patuloy ang edukasyon para sa ating henerasyon, sa daan ng pagkatuto ay walang maiiwan. Kaya halina sa Radyo Eskwela.
Human freedom should be exercised with controls and recognitions of reasonable limits. We set limits to our own freedom and learn to moderate our controls and thoughts, emotions, and actions depending on the situation. For example, a person may choose not to confront a classmate inside the classroom. Limiting our personal freedom requires us to sacrifice certain self-interest and accept certain realities that are beyond our control. For example, you would like to pursue medicine, but since your parents do not have the means to send you in medical school, you decided to take less expensive course. Our sense of right and wrong guides us in recognizing our limitations to our freedom regarding a serious matter. You can also take on a mental challenge such as learning a new skill or doing better in your studies. Our society also imposes restrictions on our individual freedom through laws and regulations. Our society implements reasonable restrictions to personal freedom to maintain order and harmony and uphold the welfare of the public. Another thing to consider is freedom should also be exercised with regard for the knowledge and truth. As rational human being, it is natural for us to think before we act. We use our freedom to act and acquire more knowledge in order to come up with decisions and courses of actions when confronted with difficult situations. The ability to acquire information and truthful knowledge regarding a particular situation is very important, since it aids us in making wise and informed choices. For example, elections will happen next year. In choosing the best candidate, you may vote someone who's popular and someone you know and like. More discerning students, however, will choose to find out each candidate's view about our country's issues before deciding who is to be voted. The last thing to consider in exercising freedoms is the benefit of the others. We should recognize and uphold not only our individual freedom, but also the freedom of others. Freedom should be exercised with due regard for the welfare of other persons, and one's freedom should be exercised not as a tool to restrict the freedom of others, but as a means to enable others to fully enjoy their own freedom.
Halina't matuto, gamit ang ating radyo, pakinggan at unawain, aralin na ituturo. Patuloy ang edukasyon para sa ating henerasyon, sa daan ng pagkatuto ay walang maiiwan. Kaya halina sa Radyo Eskwela.
And that ends our lesson for today. Now, summarize our lesson. Let's remember that freedom is an intrinsic and essential property of a person, and this is experienced through act of making choices. Freedom should be exercised in a responsible and beneficial manner. Is that clear, my dear learners? Good job! Now, before we have your quiz and activities, let us listen to this infomercial.
Gustong pagka junk food ay iwasan, ng isip ay magkalaman. Kumain ng gulay nang di ka man lupaypay, uminom rin ng gatas at nang ikaw ay lumakas. La 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 la. Kumain ng sagana at nang ikaw ay sumigla. Kumain ng wasto para isip ay maging listo. Isang paalala mula sa himpilang ito.
And we are back, my dear learners. Now, let us assess how much you understand the lesson today through a quiz. I will give you 5 questions. Put a check in the number if the statement shows responsible use of freedom, and put a cross mark if the statement does not show responsible use of freedom. Again, you have to put a check mark in the number if the statement shows responsible use of freedom, and put a cross mark if the statement does not show responsible use of freedom. Let's proceed to number 1. Instead of spending his excess allowances on online gaming, Lito decides to open a bank account and start saving. I'll repeat. Instead of spending his excess allowance on online gaming, Lito decides to open a bank account and start saving. Let's proceed to number 2. Despite the threat made by the life of Charles, he decided to be a witness regarding the crime he saw. I'll repeat. Despite the threats made on the life of Charles, he decided to be a witness regarding the crime he saw. For number 3, a woman used the internet to humiliate her ex-boyfriend by posting obscene photos of him on social media. I'll repeat, a woman used the internet to humiliate her ex-boyfriend by posting obscene photos of him on social media. For number 4, despite knowing that many of his customers were poor and desperate, a money lender continues to impose very high interest rates on their loans. I'll repeat, despite knowing that many of his customers were poor and desperate, a money lender continues to impose a very high interest rates on their loans. And for the last item, number 5, a teacher did not accept a job offer in a high-paying country and instead decided to stay in the Philippines to serve his countrymen and spend more time with her family. I'll repeat for number 5, a teacher did not accept a job offer in a high-paying country and instead decided to stay in the Philippines to serve his countrymen and spend more time with her family.
Tayo na sa Radyo Eskwela. Tayo na!
Are you done answering your quiz, my dear learners? I will give you enough time to answer it.
Halina't matuto, gamit ang ating radyo. Pakinggan at unawain, aralin na ituturo. Patuloy ang edukasyon para sa ating henerasyon. Sa daan ng pagkatuto ay walang maiiwan. Kaya halina sa Radyo Eskwela.
Alright, that ends our quiz for this episode. Great job! Now, let us have another activity. On your journal, reflect on a problem or dilemma you are currently facing. Create a graphic organizer outlining the possible choices you can make and their corresponding consequences. I'll repeat, on your journal, reflect on a problem or dilemma you are currently facing. Create a graphic organizer outlining the possible choices you can make and their corresponding consequences. Did you get that, my dear learners? That's great! I'm excited to read your answers and get to know how you use your freedom. Now, we're down to the last part of this episode. Thank you for listening and staying with me throughout the broadcast of this lesson. I hope that you learned a lot in today's learning session. Please inform your teacher if you have any questions or clarifications about this episode. And for the checking of your notebooks and journal, please drop it to the designated drop box found in your barangay hall or give your envelopes to your school advisors through your parents or guardian. Please observe health protocols in doing so. That's all, my dear learners. It's been an amazing time with you today, my dear learners. Be excited for another interesting topic next time. So consequently, keep on tuning in here. Remember that your decisions reflect what kind of a person you are. So choose wisely and nicely. On behalf of our scriptwriter, Ma'am Maria Jamila Pua, and the whole RBI production team, I am Sir Jeremy Tamayo Hilbaliga, your radio teacher. Goodbye everyone, and God bless.
Patuloy ang edukasyon para sa ating henerasyon.
Sa daan ng pagkatuto ay walang may iwan.
Kaya halina sa Radyo Eskwela!